Gentlemen and ladies, we're back from our Thanksgiving break. I trust you all had a happy and healthy and safe, very small, intimate Thanksgiving holiday. But we are back with the wrestling historian. We go back to a time when there was wrestling in all 50 states, carved up like a nice turkey or pumpkin pie, if you will, where territories ruled the land, where there were sellouts in arenas, in stadiums, in high school gymnasiums across this great country of ours, back when medical facilities were called hospitals, back when titles were called belts, and back when sports entertainment was professional wrestling. We're going to go back to November 26, 1987, Thanksgiving of 1987 that year. A very important date, and the WWF, because that was the first and only time both companies went head-to-head on pay-per-view. And kids, if you don't remember what pay-per-view is, that was back when if you wanted to see your favorite event, you would have to pay on your cable service to watch it. This is pre-WWE Network. So on this date, November 26, 1987, there was the NWA's 5th annual Starrcade going head-to-head with WWF's first ever Survivor Series. Now Starrcade had been a stalwart in the NWA for many years. Like I said, it was their 5th annual one, started in 1983 in Charlotte, and it remained in Charlotte. In 85, they did it in Charlotte and Atlanta. But Starrcade was a Southern tradition of NWA wrestling in Charlotte and in Atlanta. But the NWA had this great idea to take their act on the road, and for the first time, they held it outside of Charlotte, outside of Atlanta, and it was in Chicago. Not an NWA stronghold by any means, but it was the first Starrcade they had in Chicago, first one that wasn't in the South, and that might have come back to haunt them. And that particular Starrcade in 1987, on that card, Dusty Rhodes would defeat Lex Luger for the United States Championship. Ric Flair would defeat Ronnie Garvin to regain his NWA Heavyweight Championship. The Rock and Roll Express would defeat the Midnight Express, and for the second year in a row, the Midnight Express would be involved in a scaffold match. And this was a year after Jim Cornette had fallen from the scaffold in the Midnight Express's match against the Road Warriors. So exactly 1 year later, the Midnight Express are back up on the scaffold at Starrcade, this time against their arch nemesis, the Rock and Roll Express. Thankfully, Jim Cornette didn't take the ride this time. Rock and Roll Express still came out on top. And even though it wasn't the main event, one of the impetuses for moving Starrcade from the Charlotte Coliseum stronghold and moving it to Chicago was the NWA Tag Team title match between the champions Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard against the hometown boys, Hawk and Animal, the Road Warriors. You know, even though Hawk and Animal were from Minnesota, their adopted hometown, their background hometown was Chicago. So this was seen as a homecoming for the Warriors. The Warriors ended up pinning Tully Blanchard, but of course the referee was knocked down or thrown on the top rope. So it ended up Arn and Tully would win by disqualification. That would effectively kill the crowd there, with the Road Warriors not winning in Chicago, and the fact that they moved Starrcade from Charlotte and Atlanta to Chicago, and the fact that there was no big payoff, even though Ric Flair regained the NWA title, Dusty Rhodes, like I said, defeated Lex Luger for the United States Championship. But when the Road Warriors didn't win the NWA Tag Team title from Tully and Arn, that kind of set the left a bad taste in folks' mouth, and that more or less killed the NWA in Chicago. And specifically for any pay-per-views that they would have coming up, it wouldn't be for another 11 years until the NWA or WCW had a sellout in Chicago, because Starrcade there killed it. On that same day, while that was going on in Chicago, in Cleveland, in the Richfield Coliseum, the WWF was having their first ever Survivor Series. And where in Chicago, NWA drew 8,000 folks. In Cleveland, in the Richfield Coliseum, the WWF drew 21,300 folks. And that was the first year they had teams of 5 strive to stay alive. Opening match, the Honky Tonk Man left his entire team when he was left on the 4-on-1 with Jake the Snake Roberts. 3-on-1, I should say. Ricky Steamboat and Randy Savage.
Just say you calling somebody?
But the main event, it was kind of Bam Bam Bigelow's coming out party. The team of Bam Bam Bigelow, superstar Billy Graham, Ken Patera, and Hulk Hogan, and someone else, Paul Orndorff, went up against Andre the Giant's team, led by Bobby Heenan. Andre, King Kong Bundy, One Man Gang, The Natural Butch Reed, and Ravishing Rick Rude. And the sad part about that is that Butch Reed and One Man Gang are the only ones still alive from that team.
Yeah, that's right. My God.
Yeah. But Hogan was eliminated, and Bam Bam Bigelow went 1-on-3 against Andre, One Man Gang, and King Kong Bundy.
Bam Bam should have won.
Yeah. He pinned King Kong Bundy, pinned One Man Gang, but exhaustion and Andre the Giant's weight was too much for Bam Bam Bigelow to handle, and Andre the Giant won, being the sole survivor. And until Hogan came out to knock Andre out with his own belt, and so the crowd could go home happy. My biggest takeaway, though, was the 10 tag team match. 5 tag teams on one side of the ring and 5 tag teams on the other, and there was nowhere for anyone else to stand. So you had 16 wrestlers surrounding the ring during a 10 tag team match. On one side, you had Strikeforce, the British Bulldogs, the Rougeaus, the Young Stallions, and the Killer Bees. On the other side, against the Hart Foundation, the Islanders, the Bolsheviks, Dino Bravo and Greg Valentine, and Demolition. Amazing tag team match, and the Killer Bees would come out on top of all teams. But that was the Survivor Series. And WWF had 21,300 people for their pay-per-view. NWA had 8,000 people in their pay-per-view. And the final buy rate numbers, Starrcade did a 3.3. Survivor Series did a 7.0.
Jesus Christ.
But that was the first and only time that the WWF and the NWA would have head-to-head pay-per-views.
Your ratings on Wednesdays are a joke.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck, that made me laugh. Go ahead, Craig. I'm not laughing at fans of. I love modern wrestling. Like I watch it. I watch it. Like, TV's a bit of a pain in the ass trying to get behind because so many shitty people. Another discussion for another time. Listen to part 1. But like even with AEW, like we talked about in the past, who should have been and who isn't, and what they're doing. They just bring Sting back. Like, how are they different? But the ratings thing, it's not a discussion. There's no discussion. I'm sorry. Wrestling's burning alive right now. And from the ashes are going to be these companies for the likes of you've never seen before. But anybody saying ratings is a joke. Brian Alvarez. Jesus Christ. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Craig.
No, Those numbers once again. WWF did a 7.0. NWA did a 3.3.
The people that are like, oh, it's not like it used to. Man, you stopped watching years ago. Before it got bad, quote unquote, before it got bad and it was all these people of color and other sexualities you didn't like, you stopped watching years ago. Stop it. Craig watches.
I watch, yeah, but they sound like the NFL fans that are got hot about the protests on Thanksgiving. It's like, I thought you stopped watching the NFL when Kaepernick was doing it. So like, what do you care?
We Colin Kaepernick, the guy that was told by a Green Beret to kneel because it was more respectful because that's how they honor their dead in wars, kneeling by praying. That guy?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
What do I know?
But then a black and white quarterback do it on Thanksgiving. It's like, oh, how dare they disrespect them?
I can't eat this turkey now because two men I don't know protested atrocities. Anyway.
Yeah, but again,
that's a highlight.
Yeah.
That last 5 minutes is a highlight.
Staying on this date, November 26th, 1994, 3 days after that year's Survivor Series, in Madison Square Garden, Big Daddy Cool Diesel defeated Bob Backlund in Madison Square Garden in 8 seconds to win his first WWF Heavyweight Championship, and would start the legacy of Kevin Nash being the least profitable world champion in WWF history. 1 year later,
wow, he's just like F Nash.
Well, several factors. Wrestling was in the toilet. That it was business was down all over the country. But Kevin Nash still, despite the huge push that he got and how popular he was at the time, still made less money than any world champion in WWF history. The numbers bear that out. But Kevin Nash can always say he was a world champion, and he was a multiple-time world champion in the WWF.
And who he beat to do it?
Yes.
It's not like, I know we talk about the 8 second things, but it was still Bob effing Backlund.
Yes, and that power bomb, then Bob in his back actually put Bob Backlund on the shelf for another year and a half because of the back surgery. Bob in and itself, him regaining the championship 16 years after he 9 years after he lost it. Yes, he lost it in '83. I'm sorry, 11 years.
Yeah, you're correct. 11.
After
I knew what you meant.
After he lost it. That is a story in and of itself. That was 94. 1995, we said the first was Kevin Nash winning his first world championship. But 1995, Smokey Mountain Wrestling had their very last event. For 4 years, people, Smokey Mountain, I've mentioned it on several occasions on the Historian, started a lot of careers of people that we know and love, namely, chief among them, Kane, Glenn Jacobs. If anyone was watching any of The Undertaker's tributes to The Undertaker, his matches with Kane were legendary, but it was only after Jim Cornette asked Undertaker to come to Smokey Mountain to check out this guy Glenn Jacobs, and Mark Calloway even said after one match, he said, I knew this guy is somebody that I can make a lot of money with, because we were the same size, same height, and he was great. He was still green at the time, but willing to learn and willing to listen. And obviously Undertaker and Kane had a hell of and Glenn Jacobs and himself had a hell of a career. But Al Snow was another one. Chris Candido, Tracy Smothers, who we also lost this year. So many great. Tammy Fitch, Sunny, got her start in, for whether you like her or not. You
for
know
better
the name,
or for worse.
But you know the name Sunny, but she got her start in Smokey Mountain. So Smokey Mountain Wrestling, run by Jim Cornette, started a lot of great careers and were responsible for a lot of people. And even they were only around for 4 years, but in those 4 years, Smokey Mountain got their tag team champions on both WCW and on WWF. and no other company, no other indie company had ever done that. ECW never did that. But they had their last show, the final show, Thanksgiving Thunder, at the end, and in the fitting tribute, every face got to give Jim Cornette their finishing move, and at the end, Mark Curtis was the one who pinned Jim Cornette to say goodbye. But November 26, 1995, the final event in Smokey Mountain history. And that was November 26th. November 27th, very significant date in NWA history. We're going to go back a ways. Orville Brown, many of you may not know, but he was probably the most dominant wrestler of the 40s. And probably the most common injury of any professional wrestler, especially back then, were car accidents. There was no team bus, no team plane. You were responsible for your own transportation. So there's been more car accidents that have cost more careers in professional wrestling than in any other sport, major, minor, or otherwise. Well, Orville Brown was one of those who had a car accident that ended his career. And just so happened, Orville Brown was the current NWA champion. Orville Brown had to forfeit his championship in his upcoming bout with Lou Thesz. So Lou Thesz was awarded the NWA championship, and on this date, November 27th, 1949, Lou Thesz that would be his first of 6 NWA titles. And what I mentioned in the last historian, in 1957, during one of Lou Thesz's reigns, he would be the only and the last unified, undisputed professional wrestling champion. The dominance of Lou Thesz from the 1949 to the early 60s is unparalleled in wrestling history. We talked briefly about the Montreal Screwjob in our last historian, and we talked about Bret Hart said if it turned into a shoot, if he and Shawn started fighting for real, he knew that Shawn couldn't pin him and Shawn couldn't make him submit. When Lou Thesz was the NWA champion, it was not only because he was the best wrestler in the United States, it's because if someone didn't want to do business or had a problem with Lou Thesz going over, Lou Thesz was so good, he could legitimately pin any man's shoulders to the mat for 3 seconds or make someone submit just from his fingers or his leg holds that he had. Lou Thesz was what was called a hooker back then, what would be called a shooter now, but someone who was a legitimate Greco-Roman supreme athlete, conditioning way up the charts. I mentioned in a previous historian how he won a battle royal at the age of 72. But Lou Thesz was champion because if someone didn't want to do business, Lou Thesz would take care of them. Lou Thesz was often brought to other territories with different wrestlers who didn't want to relinquish their version of the world championship. Lou Thesz was brought in to take that title off said human being, and wouldn't be nice about it in no uncertain terms. So Lou Thesz's first of 6 NWA championships began November 27th, 1949. That same date, November 27th, 1991, at the 4th annual Survivor Series. This date was probably called up if any of you watched the week-long tribute to The Undertaker. Well, November 27th, 1991, with a little help from Ric Flair, The Undertaker won his first world championship, pinning Hulk Hogan with a tombstone piledriver onto a chair, placed in there by Ric Flair. But that would be The Undertaker's first world championship, and him going over and a legend like Hulk Hogan, just less than a year removed from him being Mean Mark Callis in WCW, is quite a triumph. But it set the career of The Undertaker, got him on his way, took him to the stratosphere, and would mark his legendary career, 30 years of whatever, but his first world title took place on November 27th, 1991. December 1st, 1973, right here, Philadelphia, at the famed Philadelphia Arena. Stan Stasiak took on the Worldwide Wrestling Federation champion Pedro Morales. And in that bout, Stan Stasiak held Pedro Morales up for a back suplex, and both men's shoulders were on the mat. The referee counted to 3, and the bell rang. And the referee didn't declare a winner. The ring announcer said, "Let's hear it, ladies and gentlemen, for a great champion, Pedro Morales." And the crowd left. And it wasn't until that weekend that it was announced that Stan Stasiak was the new Worldwide Wrestling Federation heavyweight champion. So as not to have a riot, which was commonplace in Pedro Morales matches, not unlike his predecessor,
Philly.
Bruno Sammartino, had the same effect. But so they wouldn't have a riot, they didn't announce that Pedro Morales had lost the WWF, the Worldwide Wrestling Federation Heavyweight Championship. But Stan Stasiak did indeed defeat Pedro Morales December 1st, 1973, even though it wasn't acknowledged in the ring at the time, and his hand wasn't raised in victory. He wasn't presented the belt. The ring announcer and the referee knew what was going on, and the announcer just said, "Let's hear it let's have a hand for a great champion, Pedro Morales," without acknowledging that he lost. But Stan Stasiak would have a 9-day reign as Worldwide Wrestling Federation champion to transition to Bruno Sammartino regaining the Worldwide Wrestling Federation championship. They didn't want Bruno to go over Pedro to go over Bruno. Stan Stasiak was brought in to transfer to be the transitional champion. But 9 days as champion is more than a lot of people have had.
Yeah.
More than Tommy Rich had. More than Dusty Rhodes had his first world title reign.
What a crime.
Yeah. But December 1st, Stan Stasiak, the father of meat, of Sean Stasiak, won his first and only world heavyweight champion. No, he'll never
be meat to me. He'll still be that guy from WCW and Natural Born Thrillers.
He'll always be Sean Stasiak because he looks exactly like his dad.
Yes, he does.
It's really scary. But
yes, he does.
But Stan Stasiak definitely also should be a WWF Hall of Famer because he did a tremendous. Yeah.
How was he? I just was baffled. I was baffled by what you said. How is he not?
Why is Ivan Koloff not? Why is Ray Stevens not? We can go on, but that's a HNP.
Vince is petty?
A whole nother podcast.
A whole nother podcast. We should do that one day.
We just call it HNP. Whole nother podcast. Which brings us to today. In wrestling history. 46 years ago today, in Kingamusha, Japan, the founder of All Japan Pro Wrestling, Giant Baba, would defeat the NWA champion Jack Briscoe to win his first NWA Heavyweight Championship. Giant Baba would become the first Japanese wrestler to win a recognized world championship. Ricky Dozan, far and away maybe the greatest Japanese wrestler of all time, or is known as the greatest Japanese wrestler of all time. Despite his matches with the aforementioned Luthez, was never crowned recognized as a world champion in the United States. Rusher Kimura, Strong Kobayashi, all great Japanese wrestlers, but Giant Baba was the first Japanese wrestler to win a world championship of the big three. Obviously, Japanese wrestlers would go on to win world titles in other federations. Jumbo Tsuruta in the AWA, Mr. Saito in the AWA, and Tony Winoki defeated Bob Backlund for the World Wrestling Federation Championship in a title change that was never officially recognized in the WWF, but still Antonio Inoki was a former world champion, as was Tatsumi Fujinami in the NWA. But Giant Baba did it first. And this was Giant Baba's first of 3 world title reigns that he had. He defeated Jack Briscoe, and he defeated Harley Race twice. In all 3 cases, Giant Baba would defeat the NWA champion at the beginning of the week and would lose the title at the end of the week. So if you total all of Giant Baba's NWA title reigns, they would equal 15 days altogether.
Yeah, and he was a 3-time champ, wasn't he?
3-time champion, and all 3 reigns lasted a total of 15 days.
Fucking bullshit.
He would lose in next week's historian. I will talk about December 9th, where Jack Briscoe defeated Giant Baba to regain the NWA championship. But yeah, and he defeated Harley Race twice.
God, that's tough because it's Jack Briscoe, Giant Baba. A little bit, or is it the other way?
And what those title reigns did, even though Giant Baba was a 3-time NWA champion and never once did he ever defend the belt in the United States, what it did for Japan and what it did for all Japan wrestling, got more Americans there, got more work for Americans there, made Giant Baba more over, some would say, than Inoki with those NWA title wins, because Inoki didn't have the one world championship reign he did have was disputed by the WWF, even though it was recognized in Japan. But it got more business for all Japan. Not to say that New Japan would suffer any. They would do fine, but all Japan opened up the doors for such American wrestlers like Stan Hansen, like Terry Gordy, like Hulk Hogan, like Vader later on, like Bruiser Brody. But it was those NWA title wins by Giant Baba that would put all Japan on the map, would put him on the map, and would ease the way for American wrestlers into Japan for a big payday, for international recognition, and for wrestlers that couldn't really cut it in America, or even wrestlers that were big deals in America but were even bigger deals in Japan. Namely Terry Gordy's, namely Ted DiBiase's, namely Dan Spivey's. But all that was because of the win of Giant Baba, his 3 NWA titles. But his first one took place today, December 2nd, 1974, over Jack Briscoe. And that, gentlemen and ladies, is the wrestling historian. And you can find me, Craig Regans, it says on your bottle screen, in all caps on Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter at Craig Regans, CraigLiGeons.
Follow me on Twitter, hating myself for wondering why Sting is in AEW, at DanLaw83. All social media platforms, too. This finished edited the other way around. Episode is at youtube.com/DanLaw83. If you go to vocnation.com, you listen to the episode there. Or on your smartphone, go to your podcast app, type in VOC Nation Radio Network, and listen to the episode there. Please subscribe. Tell all your friends. Tell your lovers. Tell your coworkers. Listen to HIAC Talk Radio. For the just as curious about Sting being in AEW, Craig Legans, and I'm probably sure he'll love it being in AEW Sting, though Thompson was missing in action. I am the What the Fuck is AEW Doing? Dan Law 83, Dan Calchico. We'll see you next week. What the fuck is AEW doing? Goodbye.